Hello there. Good day to you. Thanks for taking time out of your day and tuning in for another episode of Words of Life. And I want us to look at a particular passage that you may be familiar with. It's from Daniel chapter 3. And what I want us to focus in on is these individuals that will be discussed. Um, I want us to really think about uh, not just who they are, but what their real names mean and who they are as individuals and the significance of their names. And let us look at Daniel chapter 3, and we'll begin in verse 8. Might be looking at a few more verses than we normally would read. But let us look and begin by reading from Daniel chapter 3, verse 8. For this reason, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and brought charges against the Jews. They responded and said to Nebuchadnezzar the king, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, all kinds of music, is to fall down and worship the golden image. You created this great statue, just to give a little bit of background, and when all these instruments played, everyone was supposed to worship this statue. Continuing in verse 11, but whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. That connects to the description I put on being under fire, and we'll go more into that. In verse 12, there are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the administration of the province of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have disregarded you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. Now remember, you might be familiar with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but turning back to chapter 1 in verse 7, because this is important. Then the commander of the officials assigned new names to them. And to Daniel, he assigned the name of Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. So I want us to keep in mind that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these are those Babylon names that were given to them, Babylonian. But they had their birth names, their Hebrew names. And those will be significant once we conclude our reading, and we'll focus in on that and see how and why they are significant. So go back into verse 13 of chapter 3. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready, at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made very well. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire, and what God is there who can deliver you out of my hands? So you can kind of see that they were under enormous pressure. They were literally under fire at this time of, and it's kind of irony in that description that I put, because if they don't do what the king had said and commanded, they would be thrown into a great fire. So they were not under enormous, not only under enormous pressure or under fire in one sense, but they were in a very literal sense going to be under fire if they did not obey. So let us continue in verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and his facial expression was altered toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. He commanded certain valiant warriors who were in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in order to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. Then these men were tied up in their trousers, their coats, their caps, and their other clothes, and were cast into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. For this reason, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace had been extremely hot, the flame of the fire slew those men who were carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego also. But these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell into the midst of the blazing fire, still tied up. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astounded and stood up in haste. He said to his high officials, was it not 3 men who we cast bound into the midst of the fire? They replied to the king, certainly, O king. He said, look, I see 4 men loosed and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the furnace of blazing fire. He responded and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out, you servants of the Most High God, and come here. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the midst of the fire. Satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the kings of high officials gathered around and saw in regard to these men that the fire had no effect on the bodies of these men, nor was the hair of their head singed, nor were their trousers damaged, nor had the smell of the fire even come upon them. Just imagine those things. You just think about, there was no effect on them whatsoever. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel, delivered his servants who put their trust in him, violated the king's commands, and yielded up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses reduced to rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. Then the king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to prosper in the province of Babylon. Now, just for a moment, as I read from Daniel chapter 1 and verse 7, Shadrach's true name was Hananiah. I know there's another pronunciation, a Hebrew pronunciation, but that's how I think most of us pronounce it. And that meaning is God has favor. Meshach's name is, from Daniel 1 verse 7, is Mishael, which means who is like God. And Abednego, his name is Azariah. Jehovah has helped. So the God of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah delivered these men, and how appropriate that their true name is, I think, quite significant and applicable because God showed favor. God demonstrated who is like him, and he helped them out. And we see, even though that they were under fire, they lived up to their names. They lived up to who God is. They were willing to sacrifice themselves for their faith. They are a great symbol for Christians today who can stand up for their faith, rely on God, even in the most dire of circumstances. Now, we may not be delivered for our faith in those moments, like, of course, which transpired with these three individuals, but ultimately we will be delivered, maybe not in this physical life, the temporal, but in the eternal. If we remain faithful, we will be delivered. So I hope that looking at these three individuals is just a great reminder of how we should be faithful even under the direst of circumstances. And we can demonstrate such faith because others have done so before us. I hope that you will have a blessed day. Thank you again for taking time to look into the very words of life, into Scripture. God bless you.